Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepytime Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems, the ones you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Now, before we get to the meat of the show, if you don't mind sparing me a few moments of your time, I just need to put a little bit of the business side of the show up front. As always, the show is brought to you by the supporters on Patreon. A lot of people are letting me know quite often now how valuable they find the show, and those supporters who have the means to help fund it, to keep it going and help me to reach new audiences are very much appreciated. So if you're making use of Sleepytime Tales regularly to help you to deal with sleeplessness, and you have the urge to support the show, and most importantly, if you have the means, please take a look at patreon.com/sleepytimetales, or go to the link in the show notes or from the website to take a look. If you sign up from as little as $2 a month, you'll have the satisfaction of knowing that you're contributing to the rest and lifestyle improvement of thousands of people. And over and above that, there are real rewards available from that level, so that you'll get a little something to sweeten the deal. You can go from early release of the weekly episodes to weekly bonus episodes and special edits of the main show. And of course, if supporting every month is a little bit much to ask or a little bit much to commit to for you, which I understand completely, there's also the tip jar on the website, there's the merchandise store and others, all available in the show notes and on the website. But another huge way to help Sleepytime Tales is to simply spread the word. If there is someone in your life who you think will benefit from listening to it, just let them know. If you recommend the show on social media, please make sure to tag me in so that I know and I can thank you. The tag is @SleepyTimeTales on Instagram and Twitter. And I'll keep it short and sweet this week, so I just, of course, need to shout out the music. The song is Un Désert Bakumiku from Loyalty Freak Music. You can find their website on loyaltyfreakmusic.com, where they have a lot of stuff available in various different styles. A lot of it's sort of electronic, a lot of it's sort of acoustic, mostly pretty low-key stuff. Very cool to listen to, and also available for use for creative projects like podcasts or YouTube channels. So take a look at that, and I recommend checking them out. And that's it for tonight. Thanks for listening, and back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepytime Tales? What is it for? This strange idea, this weird concept, this podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to. But it's no surprise to anybody that lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast that is intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, mind spinning and emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. I'm someone who has struggled to sleep ever since I was a baby. I gave my parents sleepless nights for many years, and even once I got old enough not to bother them anymore, sleep was always a struggle for me. Some people recommended to me the idea of sleeping with the TV or the radio on, but I used to find those things disturbing, and I used to prefer to try sleep in silence. But I discovered later on in life, when I went to bed to try and listen to podcasts because I expected to be lying awake all night, that those actually had a tendency to act almost like a sedative for me. They didn't have the lights or the loud commercials from the TV that would disturb me, or the sometimes loud music, or also advertising on the radio. They tend to have a sort of consistent volume across the whole thing. So they actually were quite effective to help me sleep. I initially started out listening to various shows that kind of interested me, but I wasn't too concerned about falling asleep to. And then I eventually discovered that there are podcasts out there specifically intended to help people who struggle to get to sleep. I tried out a couple that worked well for me, and I recommended them to others, but sometimes they didn't really resonate with the people I recommended them to. For various reasons, but sometimes they didn't like the narrator's voices, or they didn't like the topics they were talking about. They found them disturbing or sometimes too exciting. And so I thought to myself, I've got a boring, deep, drony voice, and if I select my stuff quite carefully, I can do something to help the people that the existing shows couldn't reach. And so I started up Sleepy Time Tales. Now, every episode starts with this long intro. It's there for a couple of reasons. The first one is, obviously, if you're new to the show, I need to sort of make a case for it, explain to you why I think it's helpful for you, and maybe also suggest ways that it's useful for you to try and engage with it. And it serves another purpose as well for people who have been listening to the show for a while. Because in a lot of ways, insomnia is a habit. It's a bad habit that we develop over time. We allow other things to intrude into our minds and to disturb our state of mind before we go to sleep. And what we're trying to do here is build a space together, a little nest or a cabin or something to help you to relax into. So for all the listeners, listening to this intro is actually in a lot of ways more important than the actual story itself, because this is the chance to start preparing yourself for sleep. I run through something that's pretty much the same most of the time, although I re-record it every time, so it's always a little bit fresh. And it creates a sort of state of receptiveness to sleep. You become used to me going through the process and explaining the stuff and me droning on and not quite getting to the story. And by the time we get to the story, you've brushed your teeth, had a drink of water, settled into your bed, snuggled up nicely, made sure your room's not too warm, probably not all in that order. And hopefully even by the time the story starts, you're already asleep or pretty close to it. Now, as far as I know, there's a couple of different ways to engage with the show. One way is for people who actually need something to focus on, a story or an event to keep the mind on a specific point, to stop it from stressing out and spinning out rather into stress and anxieties, to focus just enough not to resist the embrace of a night's sleep when it comes for you. For some people, there's a second way. Maybe it's more just like a white noise. Some people like the sound of the rain or the ocean or wind in the trees, and some people just maybe find enjoyment in the boring dude droning on telling you a story that's not particularly exciting. Speaking of stories that are not particularly exciting, I'm picking up part 2 of a story I read a long time ago. Story of a captain, the horse with the human brain. It's a true story about a horse that was very well trained in the early 20th century, sort of pre and early World War I period. And it starts out being told from the perspective of the horse, which is both cute and charming and a little bit strange and also kind of boring, especially the way I tell it. But I think it's actually perfect for your needs. But as the story goes, it's important that you don't try force sleep. Just keep a light mental grip on the thread of the tale and allow the need for sleep to come for you. Now, obviously, if all goes well, you're going to be asleep before I get to the end of the episode. But is it important? It is important that you don't feel pressurized. It may not work on the first night. In fact, it probably won't. I do suggest you give it a solid 2 or 3 nights try just to see if this does work for you. And after 3 nights, I'm not helping you, then I'm not the guy for you, unfortunately. I do want to help as many as possible, but different people have different needs, and I can't fill all of those. Got monkeys jumping on my roof at the moment. a little bit of background noise, but I don't think it's going to come through. The joys of living in Africa. Rambunctious young monkeys going wild on our tiles. Anyway, where was I? It's also possible that one episode just isn't long enough. What I do with my sleep podcast is I usually download a whole bunch of the most recent episodes, enough to play through the whole night. And then when I go to bed, I start on the latest one and I let them play through. Because what happens to me is not so much that I can't go to sleep at night. My problem is I wake up at 3 a.m. and I find I don't quite realize that I am awake, and then eventually realize I've been lying awake for ages, and suddenly I'm disturbed and then get frustrated, yada, yada, yada. So what I do in those cases is my earbuds have usually fallen out, but what I'm listening to is still playing, and I pop them back in my ears without even looking at the screen again, and waft back to sleep. Sometimes I even do the same thing like just before my alarm goes. Starting to get light in the mornings, but and it's sunny before the alarm. But even if it's 30 minutes or 60 minutes before the alarm goes, I do the same. I pop the earbuds back in and settle down and go back to sleep. Sometimes it doesn't help much, but sometimes I do. And you may wonder, what is the point of going to sleep at when you've got 30 minutes left to go? And I've got to tell you that sometimes that really is the best part of my night. There's something about allowing deep relaxation right before the alarm that is just satisfying on a whole other level. But whether you're listening to it early in the night to help you sleep, or in the middle of the night to help you get back to sleep, or early in the morning to get those last 40 winks out before the alarm goes, it's very important that you just try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this will probably seem strange to you. So I suggest you just give it a chance. As I said, if it doesn't work tonight and it's your first time, give it a good solid 2 or 3 tries and see how it goes for you. And that's the basic idea. You relax and you lie in the dark, and while you do that, I tell you a tale. So relax, dear listener, my nighttime friend who has elected to lie in the dark, listening to my voice. You will always be safe with me. I'm here to help you relax, to improve your life in a small way, or maybe not so small. Because people don't sleep very well these days, and it does make life harder. So I'm here to do a small part to help you in a big way, to help you to face tomorrow and the day after, well rested and better able to cope and process. I believe very strongly in the benefits of kindness. I want to be kind to you. I want to share kindness with you. But it doesn't help if you can't be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up or rebuke yourself over not sleeping. Don't get tense if you just can't get over the edge of sleep, even with me here in your ears trying to help. Because I can tell you now, there are going to be nights when even I'm not going to be able to help you, even after you've gotten used to listening to sleepy time tales. But frustration is one of the great enemies of a good night's sleep, and the intention with this podcast is to short-circuit that frustration, to distract the feeling we get when we blame ourselves for not being able to let go and drift into the dark. So take a breath. Forgive the fact you can't sleep and let my voice wash over you. Take another breath. Imagine the warm darkness rising up, inviting you to sleep and to a better life starting tomorrow. And if you can't let go, forgive yourself and try again tomorrow. If you've had a life of insomnia, sleep is something like an enemy. But it is not your enemy. It's a natural process that we've been pulled away from by stress and life and supposed progress shining bright lights in our eyes at all hours. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. This week we return to Captain, The Horse with the Human Brain by George Wharton James. One day while he was away, some rude and noisy men got into a quarrel outside the stable, and they fought and swore and made an awful noise. One of them fired a gun or revolver at the other, and the hubbub was terrible. I was dreadfully alarmed. And when the captain came, a little while after, I was lathered all over with the sweat that had poured out of me because I was so afraid. My, he exclaimed as soon as he saw me. This will never do. The poor little fellow's scared almost to death. I'll never leave him alone again. How glad I was to hear that. I kissed him just as I'd learned to kiss my mother, and tried to show him my gratitude. He kept his word, and that very night he brought a groom to me, whom he called Chili. He told Chili that he was never to leave me, day or night. He was to be my companion and caretaker. He must not try to teach me or anything of that kind, but just simply see that I had plenty of hay and water, and my oats regularly, and an abundance of litter to sleep on, and I was kept perfectly clean, my stable also clean and sweet, and be with me all the time. That was a great comfort to me. Few people can know how much, for I really believe now that I am older, that horses are far more fearful and timid even than women and colts and babies. We're an awfully scary lot. It is too bad, but it is so. By this time, Captain Sigsbee had decided that I was going to suit his purpose perfectly, so he gave me his own name, that everybody might know I was his horse. He was known all over the country as Captain Sigsbee, and if I bore his name, hundreds of thousands of people would know, as soon as they heard it, who had trained me. But he never called me Captain while he was visiting in the stable, nor did he ever allow Chili to call me Captain. I was always Boy, except when he was teaching me. You see, there was a reason for that. When he said Captain, I soon learned that we were at school, and I must attend strictly to business. At other times I used to do as I liked, but when we began to work, I found out that I had to take everything seriously, do just as I was told and stick to my lessons, trying hard to learn what I was being taught. If I didn't, I failed to get the carrots, apples, sugar, or candy that I expected. Chili used to sleep in the stall next to mine, and I was generally left free, and there were no doors or bars I could go and see if he was there at any time, if I felt nervous or afraid. One morning, he didn't get up to feed me at the usual time, 6 a.m., and I waited until I was pretty hungry. Then I decided to go and see what was the matter. He was still sound asleep, so I leaned my head over him and rubbed his face with my nose. That woke him up right away, and he jumped up and fed me. He laughed and patted me and called me a cute fellow and said I was a smart horse. So when he failed to get up and feed me the next time, I didn't wait, but went right up to his cot and did it again. I did this several times and always got my feed right away, but one morning after I woke Chili, he must have dropped off to sleep again. When he didn't come with my oats, I went round to see what the matter was, and there he was, sound asleep again with the covers pulled up over his head. I felt a little bit angry with him for neglecting me like that, so I just took hold of the bedclothes, gave them a yank, and pulled them right down nearly to the foot of the cot. My, how he jumped. He was out of that cot in a flash, but he laughed and said there was no beating me, he'd have to give up. I hardly knew just what he meant at the time, but I had learned a good lesson. For ever since then, I don't waste any time in waking my groom, and if he doesn't feed me on time, I go and pull off the bedclothes from him, and I get my oats without further delay. Even though sometimes after giving me my breakfast, he goes back to bed and takes another snooze. Chili and I soon became good friends, but that did not take away my affection for my master. I was always glad to see him. He used to come and talk to me, man talk of course, but I soon learned to know a great deal of what he said, and I always paid attention. Well, perhaps to be strictly truthful, I would better say nearly always, for he never failed, when I did so, to give me some tidbit or other that I much enjoyed. Of all these, I like sugar the best, but he says too much sugar isn't good for me, so I never get quite as much as I would like. During all this time, I was being educated. I was taught to count with my feet, to pick out numbers and colors, and to know the difference between men, women, boys, and girls. I learned to add numbers together, to say yes and no, to kiss my master, to sit on a chair, even on his lap, without hurting him. Make change on a cash register, play tunes on the chimes, and lots of other things. My master was always good and kind to me while teaching me. He never got impatient, and he would stop every once in a while and let me rest. And he always gave me something nice to eat when I did well. So I used to look out of the window of my stable and see other horses dragging heavy loads, sometimes being driven fast by delivery boys in hot weather until they were dripping with perspiration, or in winter time out in the snow or where the streets were so slippery that they fell down. I often heard their drivers shouting roughly at them and using foul language, and I've seen them whip the poor animals cruelly, and then I knew how much better off I was than they, and it made me feel very thankful and grateful to my good master. He always talked nicely while he was training me, told me that if I was good and learnt my lessons, people would come to see me and they would love me, and he and my mistress in Chile would be very proud of me. He told me about some of the boys and girls who went to school but who refused to learn their lessons, and the misery and wretchedness that often came to them as the result. So I grew more and more anxious to learn, for although I was only a horse, I wanted people to love me and think well of me and say nice things about me. For 5 whole years my master kept me at school. Every day he came to my stable or took me out into the yard or to give me my lessons. I guess I was a slow learner and it took a great deal of patience to make me remember, for I was only a horse, not a boy or a girl with human intelligence. We had to go over the same lessons scores hundreds of times until I knew them by heart. But my master was kind all the time, seldom spoke angrily to me and never whipped me, although he kept a small switch in his hand with which he gave me a gentle reminder once in a while, when I was inclined to be a little more frolicsome than usual. One day he came to me and said, "Now, Captain, you and I are going to travel and see the world. Do you know what I've been educating you for? I'm going to let people all over this country see you and what you can do, so that they will no longer be able truthfully to say that a horse has no intelligence. Chili will go along with us. When we are on the trains, he will remain in your stall and travel with you. And when we stop anywhere to show, he will spend his nights with you as he has done all the time." Just think what news this was for a horse, how I pricked up my ears, how I looked forward for the day to come when we should start. At last the eventful day arrived. Quite a number of people came to see us go. Chili led me from my stable to what he called a boxcar at the railway station. It had padded ends and sides so that when the train bumped while the cars were being switched, or at the starting or stopping of the train, I could not get hurt. I'm free to confess I didn't like the idea of going into the car at first, and both my master and Chili had to persuade me before I went in. When the train started, I didn't like it at all, and I was uneasy for a few days whenever we were on the train. But Chili was always there, and he kept telling me there was nothing to be afraid of, as I had learned to trust him. I soon stopped worrying, and I have never worried since. Some people tell me that in that regard I learned to be wiser than a great many humans, who ought to know that worrying does no good, and yet they still go on about doing it. How I pity these such people, that they don't have a little bit of simple horse sense. By and by I learned, as we travelled, to look out of the window to see what was outside. What a lot of wonderful things I saw. Of course, we kept stopping, sometimes for a week, then for only a day or two, and we gave exhibitions all the time. The people coming in large numbers to see me. They all wondered how my good master had succeeded in training and educating me so well. Then sometimes they came up and petted me, and the girls and the women and even the boys and men kissed me on the nose and said such nice and flattering things to me. I enjoyed it ever so much, for I like people to like me. And of course, my master never forgot to give me a carrot or an apple or a cookie when I did well, so that he said I grew fatter and saucier every day. My very first public appearance and performance was in the lobby of the Sherman House in Chicago in August 1913 at the Engineers Convention. I went from there to the Great Northern Hippodrome, where I stayed for a whole week. Then we started and took the complete circuit to the Miles Theatres, starting from Chicago and going to New York one way and returning to Chicago another way. I enjoyed it very much and made lots of friends on that first trip. When we got back to Chicago, it was late in the fall of 1914, and my master told me we were not going to work anymore publicly for several months, as he wanted to get me ready for the Panama Pacific International Exposition at San Francisco, that was to open on the 20th of February 1915. That great big long name made me nervous at first. I wondered what it meant. But by listening to my master and Chili talking, I soon learned that it was a great and wonderful show, in honor of the completing of the Panama Canal that united the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and they called it international because all the nations of the earth were invited to take part in it. Later I learned that there were to be magnificent buildings, bigger than I had ever seen, even in Chicago and New York. Palaces of music and education and fine arts and mining and domestic industries and foreign industries, of liberal arts and electricity and engineering and food products, and that besides all the countries that took part would have their own buildings. Then there were to be magnificent courts and fountains and arches and columns and domes and statues and bas-reliefs and pools and flower gardens and trees, and at night time searchlights and fireworks and steamworks and illuminations more beautiful than anything of the kind men had ever seen before. So even though I was only a horse, I was anxious to go and see it all. Then Chili told me there was to be one whole long street devoted to pleasures and amusements that they were to call the Zone, and we were to appear there. There was to be a wonderful exhibit showing the appearance and working of the Panama Canal. Hundreds of strange people from all over the world, cowboy shows, mining camps, representation of the 7 days of creation and the Battle of Gettysburg, Captain Scott's trip to the South Pole, the fight of the dreadnoughts and submarines, an incubator for babies, human babies, mind, the tiniest little humans you ever saw. The Grand Canyon, the Pueblo Indian Village, the Yellowstone National Park, the streets of Cairo, Toyland, the Japanese town, and lots of others that I do not now recall. We were to have our show right on the Zone and be one of the many marvelous and wonderful attractions. The more I heard about these things, the more anxious I was to go. And yet I wondered a good deal as to whether I should be as attractive to the crowd among so many other interesting things as I had been when there were not so many. But my master and Chili seemed satisfied, so I stuck to my motto and quit worrying. Day after day we rehearsed my performance and went over my lessons until my master said I was show perfect. That made me feel good. Then one day I heard Master tell Chili to go and see that his orders were carried out about the car, and I learned then that the car was ordered that was to take me to San Francisco, and that the workmen were busy at work upon it, padding it and making it comfortable for me as well as Chili. When everything was ready and lots of hay and grain put in the car, Chili took me aboard, and that night we started. Over the plains of Illinois and Iowa, into Nebraska and Wyoming, through Utah and Nevada we rode. What a lot of different country I saw from any I had ever seen before. When we reached the mountains, I thought they were wonderful, and how I enjoyed the ride as we raced down from the summit to Cheyenne. At Reno, we began the climb over the Sierras, and Chili said we were in California. I had heard it was a land of sunshine and flowers and birds and fruit, but we were in a region of rocks and mountains, precipices and canyons, snow and ice. And while there were plenty of beautiful trees, I couldn't see a single flower. When Chili brought from one of the streams several times a day a bucket of water for me to drink, it was colder than any well water had ever been given in my life. My, how it made my teeth ache, but it was so sweet and tasted so good, as if the winds of God had blown over it for months, bringing freshness and sweetness and filling it full of their deliciousness. As soon as we reached the summit, we began to go down to lower levels, and long before we left the snow, I could smell the sweet growing timothy and clover and alfalfa, and even the blossoms on the fruit trees. And when we reached Auburn and Newcastle and lots of other towns up there, we were in the real California I had always pictured. Larks and thrushes, linnets and mockingbirds, song sparrows and warblers were there by the thousands, singing such songs as I had never heard, and flowers. There were flowers of 1,000 kinds, all new to me, pushing their way up through the green grass. And as for the fruit trees, although it was early in February, there were thousands of them already in bloom, and as sweet and fragrant and beautiful as a Garden of Eden. It was the 14th of February 1915 when we reached San Francisco. There Chili took me to a comfortable livery barn, where I remained until March 17th. This was owing to the fact that the theatre my master was having built for our performances was not completed until that time. At the rear of it was a fine barn and stable for my use, where Chili could also sleep. Although we began a month late, we soon made up for lost time. The people came by the hundreds and then by the thousands. They petted me and laughed at my tricks, especially when I felt good and came running onto the platform, kicking up my heels and having a general good time. The women called me a dear and a darling, and the men said I was remarkable, a marvel, and a wonder. And the boys said I was a corker and a Jim Dandy. Anyhow, those who saw me pick out the good-looking ladies and the fine-looking men, sort out colours, add, subtract, multiply, give change on the cash register, pump, corkscrew, hobby horse, sit on my master's lap, play the chimes and do my various exhibitions of thought, memory and reason, went away and spread my fame. My master, of course, felt very happy over it, for each day the receipts grew larger. But as more people came, I had to give performances more often, and I soon began to think I was overworked. My master didn't think so, but he didn't realize how tired I got. I tried to tell him as well as I knew how, but he didn't seem to pay any attention. And I was beginning to feel he loved money better than he loved me. But all this time he was watching me very closely, and one day, when I was quite tired, he did not let me give so many performances. Then, too, there was another thing that was bothering me. While I loved Chili very dearly, as he was always good to me, somehow he was not so careful and attentive to my needs in San Francisco as he had been hitherto. I began to watch him and found he came in late very often, and I soon saw that he was getting into bad company. As soon as my master found this out, he let him go and secured for me a new groom. He was a gentleman from the south who thoroughly understands fine horses and whose name is Jasper, and we soon became very attached to each other. Just about this time, a beautiful little woman came right up to my stall and said as she gave me some sugar, "You beautiful creature, I've been watching your performance. You're wonderful. I'm afraid they're working you too hard. You should have someone to help you. I'm going to ask Captain Sigsbee if he won't let me come and relieve you." I pricked up my ears at this and watched and listened very intently when she went to my master. I then learned that her name was Madame Ellis, and she was a mind reader and telepathist. She explained that she had watched me give the blindfold part of my entertainment with the greatest interest, and was well satisfied that I understood every word that was said to me. Then came the words that almost made me dance for joy, for she said, "Captain Sigsbee, I give a blindfold entertainment that will go wonderfully well with your captain's exhibition, and at the same time give him plenty of opportunity to rest and take a good breathing spell between performances." My good master seemed as pleased as I was, for he immediately made the arrangement with Mr. Ellis, and the very next day Madame Ellis appeared on my platform. No one will ever know how much I was interested in this first performance of hers. I watched her every move, for when they wanted me to go to my stable and rest while she performed, I clearly showed them that I did not want or intend to go. I stood and saw the whole performance, and I can only say that if Madame Ellis is as pleased with what I do as I am with what she does, then she is a very pleased woman. We became the best and dearest of friends, and have remained so ever since. For when a horse gives his friendship, he is not like some human beings I've seen, fickle and faithless, but is constant and faithful. We have never had the sign of a quarrel, and there's not the slightest jealousy between us. She is as proud of my triumphs and success as I am of hers, and they tell me that as far as earning money is concerned, Madame Ellis and I earn more than any other show on the zone, not even excepting the wonderful Panama Canal and the picture of Stella. There were a great many very noted people came to see us while we were in San Francisco. Mr. C.C. Moore, president of the Exposition, and Mrs. Moore, together with Mayor and Mrs. Rolfe, and thousands of others came from all over the world, as well as those who lived in San Francisco became my good friends. After I'd gone away, President Moore wrote the following letter to my master, which I'm proud to have people read. Panama Pacific International Exposition, 1915. San Francisco, California. Office of the President, October 6th, 1916. Captain W.A. Sigsbee. Dear Sir, it is a pleasure to inform you how much I enjoyed the performance of your horse Captain at the Panama Pacific International Exposition, which I saw a number of times. The performance of this highly intelligent animal was a great attraction to visitors of the exposition. Very truly yours, Chas C. Moore, President. When the exposition closed in San Francisco, my master and Jasper took me down to Venice in Southern California, where we stayed until March 18th, 1916, when we moved to the Panama, California International Exposition at San Diego. Of course, there was nothing like the large number of people here that there were in San Francisco, but we made many good friends and had some large audiences. Among those I esteem most highly were President and Mrs. G. Aubrey Davidson and their children, Mr. H. J. Penfold, the secretary, and all the officials. They all used to come and pet me whenever opportunity arose, and many of the leading men and women of the city seemed glad to call themselves my friend. But I'm free to confess that I have very few special friends, and one of these is the great singer Ellen Beach Yaw. While singing in the San Francisco Exposition, she used to come to see me often, and became very much attached to me, as I to her, and both there and in San Diego she would sing to me. Some people think I don't understand music, in spite of my playing accurately several tunes on the chimes. But my master and Jasper both know that when I am nervous and tired, on the other hand, frolicsome and frisky, I am always glad to stand with perfect quietude and restfulness, when my dear Miss Yaw comes to sing to me. As soon as she holds up her hand and looks at me, I know she's going to pour out a sweet song that will delight me. So I listen with all my attention, and she never has to wait for my appreciation. I go right up to her and kiss her many thanks for her song as soon as she has done singing. Another thing I enjoy amazingly, quite as well as I like music, I like to go out and stand in the sun. I think one of my faraway ancestors must have lived in and loved a desert country where the sun shone all the time. For I'm never so happy as when Jasper allows me to go out and stand where the beams of the sun come straight down upon my back. It feels so good and it soothes me so that I like to enjoy it and go to sleep enjoying it. And if they would allow me to, I would go out and roll in the sunshine, and then lie down as a cat does before the fire, reveling in the warmth and going to sleep under its influence. Sometimes people wonder how I make my wants known, seeing that I can't speak. With my master and Jasper, I seldom have any trouble, for by pawing or whinnying I can arrest their attention, and then there are many things I need that they quickly ask about. If they think I want water, they ask water. If I want it, I nod. If not, I shake my head. And so with going out, untying me, giving me more air, for I like plenty of fresh air, or anything else I may desire. There are some people who think I don't like to give performances. I'm sure I don't know why, except that I do get tired a little once in a while, and sometimes my master wants me to be quiet and good when I feel frisky and frolicsome and want to kick up my heels. I always feel better the busier I am, and I remember one day in San Francisco when we gave 19 performances. I was so full of fun and spirits when we got through that Jasper had to be pretty stern with me before I would quieten down. Another thing that amuses me, people often ask if I ever eat anything besides oats and hay and things of that kind. It amuses me because I like everything, just as most healthy boys and girls do. I eat bread and butter, and I like it with jam or on sugar or honey, and parboiled eggs and nuts and every kind of fruit, raw, cooked or preserved. Candies I just dote on, and vegetables come as a welcome change. I can eat them raw, cooked, hot or cold, and I don't object to lettuce put in sandwiches. Sandwiches? Of course I eat them. Ham, beef, chicken or tongue with mustard or without. And nothing I like better at times than a ham bone to gnaw on. Sometimes Prince, Jasper's pet dog, brings one in and shares it with me, and I enjoy it amazingly. But one of my special delicacies is cake. My dear mistress, Mrs. Sigsbee, long ago found that out, and whenever she wants to make me feel extra good, she makes a cake for me. My, she's a fine cake maker. One day she had made a large cake for a party, and I think it was Master's birthday, and they had invited a lot of friends. That day, Master loosed me from the stable and sent me up to the house to see Mistress. Sometimes he does this and trusts me to go directly there. I did so this time, and when I got to the yard, I went right to the kitchen window, which was open, and through which a delicious odor came. Right there on the table was the cake. It was this that smelled so good. I put my nose close to it, and it made my mouth water. There was no one there to tell me not to do it, so I just bit right into the middle of it, took a large mouthful, and it, what the boys say, went to the right spot. The trouble was that first mouthful whetted my appetite for more, and I had made a pretty big hole in the cake before Mistress came in and found what I had done. She drove me away, but began to laugh so heartily that when Master came running in to answer her call, she could scarcely speak. She could just point to the cake and to me. There I was with cake crumbs and jam or jelly all over my nose, and in my whiskers, and the mistress at last managed to gasp out between laughs, "Captain celebrating your birthday, he likes cake too." At first Master was inclined to be mad, but Mistress laughed him out of it and said why shouldn't I like birthday cake as well as he? She'd make another, and even if she couldn't, she would buy one. Then she put the rest of the cake away, and every day for another week I had a chance again to celebrate Master's birthday. Do I ever get ugly-tempered? I think I can truthfully answer that I do not show temper very often. I must confess, however, that now and again I'm not as well-dispositioned as I generally am. Sometimes I feel a little out of sorts, and then I act up just as a naughty boy or girl does. I want my master to hurry up my performance and let me get away, and I bungle and stumble and do the very thing I ought not to do. When I feel like this and have to pick out the colors, I grab the cloth viciously and sometimes deliberately take the wrong one, or slam the drawer of the cash register, and when it comes to playing the chimes, it is too funny the way I find myself acting. When I reach the last few notes, I hit them one after the other as fast as I can, and then run around the stage to show Master I am impatient to get away. I suppose boys and girls get that way in school sometimes. Anyhow, that is what Master and some of the people who come to see me say, and I can well believe it, for there is not so much difference between my actions and those of boys and girls, if people could only understand them all right. One day Jasper brought a pigeon into the stable. I heard him say a lady had given it to him. We soon became the best of friends. The pigeon would coo to me and come to my feeding rack, and I would nuzzle up to her and whinny. She flies about me and lights on my head and struts up and down my neck and back, and I just enjoy it. We often go to sleep together, I with my head close up against the pigeon, she snuggling close to my soft nose. I feel so much better now that I have so nice a companion, for I'm not so nervous when I hear strange footsteps or just before we are going to have a show. Sometimes I'm so full of fun and frolic that my master lets me play a while. Then I just enjoy running about the stage, kicking up my heels, showing my teeth at people, and making believe that I'm very savage. Hitting a note on the chimes and dashing across to the cash register, opening the drawer and ringing the bell, and picking up a colored cloth in my teeth and shaking it as if I was angry. But as soon as I've had enough of this, I quieten down and we go ahead with the show, as steadily as can be. You see, my master understands me, and doesn't all the time feel that he has to hold me in to make me behave, as people call it. I'd like to know why I shouldn't have high spirits and be happy and jolly, if any horse on earth should. I'm well cared for day and night. I have all I want to eat of the very best that money can buy. I'm housed in the most comfortable stable that can be hired, with plenty of good clean bedding and a rug to keep me warm at night. I have my companions, the pigeons and Prince, the fox terrier, and Jasper is on hand all the time, so why shouldn't I be full of frolic? That comes from being happy and healthy, and anyone with sense can see that I am both. For my eyes are clear, my breath is sweet, my skin is clean, and I am full of life and spirits. My master is very good to me, and I love him dearly, but I'm free to confess that I have special affection for Madame Ellis's little girl. She is about 10 years old, and we are real chums. Her name is Margaret. She comes nearly every day to see me, and she pets me, and I pet her. She brings me sugar and apples, and then after I've eaten them, she sits on my back, and after a while we play circus. She takes her shoes off so that she won't hurt me, and stands on me, walks from my shoulders to my tail, standing either looking frontwards or backwards, and I walk around carefully so as not to make her fall. And when we get through, she hugs and kisses me, and I like it amazingly and kiss her back and would hug her if I knew just how to do it. And now I have told my story. Now that the San Diego Exposition is over, my master, I expect, will take me all over the country, so that more people may see me and become interested in my education. He feels that the performances I give will interest children and those who have to handle horses, and thus lead them to treat all horses with more respect and kindness. When human beings feel that horses have intelligence, no matter how small in quantity or good in quality it may be, they will act differently towards them. It will lead them to be more tolerant, patient, and kind. We hope to work with all the humane associations and societies for the prevention of cruelty to animals, for my master knows, and I also well know, that when children and teamsters see me and watch what I can do, their hearts become more gentle towards all animals, and thus the day is hastened when kindness and love shall reign supreme upon the earth. How I Bought and Trained Captain, by his owner, W.A. Sigsbee. Editor's Introduction. To render the story of Captain complete, it was essential that the reader should know something of his trainer, his educator, the man to whose enthusiasm and ability we owe the pleasure the horse has afforded us. Consequently, I have questioned Captain Sigsbee again and again as to his methods, and the story which here follows contains his answers to these many questionings, which I have put into consecutive and readable form, but as nearly as is possible in his own words. I was brought up in the horse business. My father and uncles were horsemen before I was born. They lived in Dane County, Wisconsin, 12 miles from Madison, and there I first saw the light. One of my uncles had trotting horses, and almost as soon as I could do anything, I used to go and help him. When I was 14 years old, I was regularly employed by him during my vacations to help on the farm, in the stables, and to accompany him to the trotting track. I soon learned to ride as a jockey, and up to the time I was 18 years old, that was my occupation. I began to work for myself. I bought, educated, or trained, and then sold horses and dogs. I was much interested in them and always seemed to have fair success in their management. As I grew older, I used to go with my own horses to the county and state fairs, the latter being held at Madison. When I was 24 years old, I married, settled down on a farm, and as horse trading seemed naturally to be the business I was especially adapted for, naturally I followed it. Whenever my neighbors wanted a horse that was extra well trained, they would come to me. And if I showed them one that could do a few tricks, they liked it nonetheless, and were not unwilling to pay a little extra for the pains I had taken. The year after I was married, I moved to Humboldt, Iowa, where I bought another farm, and for 4 more years continued my work as a farmer and horse trader. Then I bought the Park Hotel in the town of Humboldt, which I ran for 11 years. Never, however, for one moment losing my interest in horses. In fact, it was one of the most profitable parts of my business. Many farmers, showmen, circus men, and others came to the town and stopped at my hotel. So I was never away from the atmosphere of the horse ring. Many a time when they were in a tight place, the show or circus men would come and ask me to help them out, for my reputation as a trainer had spread, and it was pretty generally understood that I was an exceptional hand for teaching horses and dogs rather unusual and interesting tricks. In time, the great circus masters like Barnum and Bailey, Al Ringland, and others came to me and asked me to train horses for them, so that my horse business grew, and with it, my reputation. Naturally, I was always on the lookout for colts that promised well, or horses that showed some extra intelligence, and my eyes were keen for mares that showed a superior order of intelligence that were soon to have colts. About this time, my eyes were attracted to a beautiful mare, evidently with foal. No sooner did I see her than I wanted her. I found on inquiry that she had been bred to a spotted Arabian, as fine and beautiful a creature as she herself was. Satisfied that she was what I wanted, I purchased her. Already I had begun to speculate as to what I should do with her colt. If it was a prettily shaped animal, was as intelligent as the father and mother, I decided it should receive the best education I was capable of giving it. As the days of the mare's time passed, I grew more and more anxious. My hopes were raised high, and I was correspondingly expectant and at the same time afraid. What if the colt should prove stupid? I awaited the birth of that colt as eagerly as a royal family awaits the birth of the child of a king. Hence you can understand my delight and satisfaction when the little lady came, that I found her faultless in appearance, neat, trim, dainty, and beautiful, with intelligent eyes and face, and every indication of being a most superior animal. From the hour of her birth, I watched her far more closely than many a child is watched. I was in and out of the stable a score of times a day. While she appeared intelligent, I wanted to know with certainty as soon as I could. I was not long in discovering, and this is how it was done. My barn had double doors, one on each side. As it was warm weather, I had both doors open to allow a current of air through the building. When the colt was 4 or 5 days old, I wished to hitch up the mare and drive her, but I did not think it wise to let so small and young a colt go along. So I closed the doors and left her inside. She became much excited at being separated from her mother, ran around wildly, whinnied, and generally fretted. But I felt she would have to learn to lose her mother, so I drove away and left her to fight it out as best as she could. The next day I went into the barn and groomed down the mare, the colt apparently paying no attention. But the moment I took the harness from its peg and began to put it on the mother, the little miss ran out of the doors. I thought I had scared her in some way and paid no particular attention, but when I was ready to drive away and tried to get her back into the barn, she positively refused to go or be driven. She was as resolved to stay out as I was to have her go in, and was only when I secured additional help that I was able to get her inside. The same thing occurred on the following day, and then I began to suspect that the colt knew as well as I did what was going on, and was resolved not to be left behind. So I called to my wife to come and watch with me while we experimented. So long as I merely fussed around with the mare, cleaning her, etc., it was all right. But the moment I touched the harness and made it appear, I was going to hitch up, I outshot the colt from the barn in a moment. We tried this out a dozen times and always with the same result. This occurred when she was 9 days old, and with conviction I turned to my wife and exclaimed, "She'll do, the little Trixie. She's got brains, and I'll begin to train her right away." Thus she got a name, and I started upon her education. In my past experience, I had taught many horses to respond to questions with yes or no, to pour out numbers, to kiss me, to sit down, lie down, roll over, and other simple tricks. I would ask if they would like a drink, a feed of oats, a lump of sugar, etc., and teach them how to answer with a nod of the head, and with a shake, when I asked, "When I whip you?" or "I guess you don't want any feed today." But with Trixie I determined to go further than this, and see if she really could be trained, or better still, educated, in any degree. Thus began Trixie's education, which continued persistently for 18 months. Every day I kept at it, and it might be interesting here to state that while I was educating Trixie, she was educating me. I learned a great deal about horses and horse nature in those 18 months. In due time I trained her so that she could pick out numbers on call, colors, could add, subtract, multiply and divide, could count with her feet, sit in a chair on my lap and answer questions. I then decided to take her out on the road and give exhibitions with her. But first of all I decided to give a test exhibition at our county fair of Humboldt, my own town. Of course I was well known, and my horse training proclivities were the subject of conversation all throughout the country, but few knew how much I had accomplished with Trixie. Hence that first appearance was a great surprise to my neighbors. Needless to say, it was also a wonderful success. Everyone was delighted with the exhibition and marveled at the intelligence the beautiful little creature displayed. And I think I will call it there tonight. If you want to hear more about Trixie and more about Captain, then you can find the original book, The Story of Captain, the Horse with the Human Brain, up on Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepytime Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Un Desire by Kumiku. Check out more of their work on their website, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.